As we continue our journey through this Easter tide, we are coming quickly to its end. This coming Thursday is the Feast of the Ascension, 40 days after Easter. And a scant 10 days after that, we celebrate the 50th day, the Feast of Pentecost. And so our gospel lessons turn our eyes to that deep reality, that Jesus did depart from us in the body, when we cannot see him or touch him as those first disciples were able to do. Instead, we believe in Jesus because of the testimony of so many others before us. Now, thousands of years later, the vibrancy of faith is still with us. And we could ask why. Is it because his teachings are so deeply profound? In many ways they are. But why is it that so many people commit themselves so deeply to this message, this good news, this gospel? And I think it is because of what Jesus is hinting at now. He is telling us that he will send us an advocate. That is the Holy Spirit. Now, the word advocate itself kind of means attorney or lawyer, someone who argues our case for us. And maybe that is one way we could see it. But in another place, Jesus calls the Holy Spirit the Comforter. And it is comfort that these first disciples needed as their lives changed radically, as Jesus departed from their eyes and from their midst in the body, and they were able only to appreciate and experience him in the depths of their spirit and their souls. It was this comforter then that came to them and got them through that difficult transition and gave them the wonderful gifts that they received on Pentecost Day, that they were able with certainty and assurance to go out into the crowds, into the world, and proclaim that Christ was risen. He was risen indeed. It is that for which we look in these days, for an advocate, for a comforter. When I was a young boy and I would get sick, and you know how youngsters can be when they're not feeling well, a bit cranky, a little out of sorts, my mother would invite me to come over and sit next to her on the sofa, or if I was so ill I needed to be in bed, she would sit on the side of the bed. And she would take me and she would put my head on her lap. And then she would gently just stroke my hair. Even as I speak of it, I can feel those tender touches even now. And it was those touches that brought great comfort. That is what God is trying to do for us. He was doing it for those first disciples in those early days to assuage their anxiety and their concern that Jesus was no longer with them, and yet they were faced with living out the good news, with living out the commands of Jesus. We, in our day, find different anxieties. And perhaps our anxiety goes so deeply that we might even wonder where God is in the midst of this pandemic. We might begin to question whether God really cares as we suffer through it. And so many others are genuinely ill, even unto death. It is with a parent's tender stroke on our souls that God is comforting us. And it is doing this day after day after day. For the Spirit of God is with us, has never departed from us. That was Jesus' promise, that he would go to the Father and would send us this Comforter, and this Comforter would be with us each and every day of our lives until the very consummation of the world. It is with that confidence then that we can turn to God in these difficult times. We can turn to God when we are not feeling well, when we are either anxious in our souls or even that our bodies are not comfortable. And we can ask for God's comfort and the power of the Holy Spirit. It is that giving of comfort that gets us through. And once we begin to heal, once we begin to emerge out of our anxieties, will strengthen us to make the transition to new days, to new times, to a new normal, as people are calling it. We will not return to the old ways, but rather we will have been forever changed by this experience. In that way, we are undergoing the same kind of trial that St. Peter talks about in that first lesson, that same kind of trial that those early disciples did. In their anxieties and in their fears, their lives were changed forever. They could not go back to the old ways. The fishermen couldn't return to their boats, the tax collectors to their booths. No, rather, they found a new mission. They found a new way of living. And so that is the challenge that we are given today. Even as we go through these difficult days and wait for that day when we can go out and not be afraid, when we can go out and embrace one another without fear of infection or infecting others, when we can go out and rejoice in power. Those days will come, and they will be given to us by God. The joy that we find in our hearts then is being formed in us now. Even as gold and silver are purified in suffering and fire, so too as we go through these days, we are being changed, transformed, purified for a new kind of life. It is my earnest prayer that we will emerge from this time reborn in the Spirit in a way we did not know before. That the church will be stronger, it will be deeper, the message will be clearer as we offer to a broken world the saving and healing power of God's grace. May it be so for us, even now. May we feel those tender strokes on our heads, in our souls, that we might find comfort in the very presence of the Spirit of God.